Hey, it's me, Nelthazar, and welcome to another Magic the Gathering Puzzle Quest video. In today's video, I'm going to be going over the second Merfolk node, River Herald Scout, in the Survivors of Four Tribes Part 1 event. So, let's get into it. This node requires that we summon 6 or more land supports, and we convert 10 or more gems during a single fight. Honestly, if you succeed in summoning 6 or more lands, you're definitely going to convert 10 or more gems during the fight. So really, what you need to do is summon the lands. Now, there are a few really good ways of going about it. I have the deck that I'm going to be using up on the left. And then I'm going to go ahead and showcase some options in the event that you don't have some of the key cards or Planeswalkers in order to make it happen. So for this video, I'm going to do it a little bit differently than usual in that I have a deck that I am using, and I have a deck that generally showcases what you can use if you're a newer player with a smaller collection. But if you are able to build upon that deck, or if you're able to even just tweak the one that I'm using a little bit because you're just missing a few cards, I would very strongly recommend that. So the basis for this video is really going to be more taking a look at the essential cards for building a deck for this node than it is a here are decks, use these decks, with the exception of my deck, which is if you have these cards, use this deck. It's going to be a really easy node. So the first thing that makes this node really, really easy is if you have the Wrenn and Realmbreaker Planeswalker. If you do not yet have Wrenn and Realmbreaker, I would very strongly suggest that you pick this Planeswalker up when it enters the vault, if it is not in the vault at the time of you seeing this video. This Planeswalker for me is an S+ tier Planeswalker. It's one of the best Planeswalkers in the game. And the abilities for this Planeswalker are going to mesh really well with the objectives. So summoning 6 or more lands is going to be really easy with a third ability, Root Resonator. You're going to create 4 rich soil tokens, and those tokens are lands. So you'll see up there at the top, right, it says support card land. And so that's going to count for 4 of your lands, and it's also going to convert 7 gems to the colors of the first creature support card in your graveyard, which is really, really nice. So you're going to not only convert gems, but you're also going to go ahead and make land support tokens. So you'll wind up being able to use that ability a ton. The passive for this Planeswalker makes it so that you're going to convert extra gems when you match, so long as that swap is not green. And so you're going to wind up getting mana and loyalty very, very quickly. Now, apart from the abilities of the Planeswalker itself, we have some really powerful cards for getting lands. Things like Vorinclex, which is going to fetch 2 lands from your library and give them mana, and the Blossoming Tortoise, which is going to destroy the top 4 cards of your library when it enters play and attacks, and it's also going to go ahead and bring something back from the graveyard. So it's going to bring a permanent back, and so it'll either bring back something like a Planeswalker, or I guess they're called Vanguards in this game, some kind of other support, a land, the Saga, or the Tortoise itself, or Vorinclex, right? So Vorinclex is going to get you 2 lands. If it brings back a land, that's 1 land. All in all, you're going to be getting good stuff. Beyond that, you are going to want some kind of win condition in your deck, and so the triumvirate of Nissa's Expedition with the Colony Garden and Dryad Arbor from Green Puzzle Masters is absolutely the way to go. This is the core. Those 3 cards are really the core for a lot of my decks in this event. And so if you do not have those, this is definitely worth an investment. I would say that they are the basis upon which I judge standard cards, is whether or not they're better than those 3 combined. And I think that they will always be relevant unless they wind up tweaking how the garden works. They've tweaked Seed, they've made it a little bit weaker, but it makes really no substantial difference to the power of this combo. So what this is going to do is the garden is going to make it so you get a 5/5 token every time you seed a gem. The Dryad Arbor is going to make it so that whenever you make a green match, you're going to seed a gem. And the Expedition is going to fetch whichever one you don't have, with a preference for the garden, unless you don't want to kill your opponent too fast. And that's going to get you a whole bunch of conversion. On top of that, when you play the Expedition, it's going to enchant a creature of yours so that until your next turn, whenever anyone plays a card, you're going to seed a gem. That's you or your opponent. So that'll wind up making it so that a whole bunch more elemental tokens come down. And it's also going to make it with all those elemental tokens coming down so that when you match your green gems, you'll get more mana out of them, which is really, really good. I'm personally throwing Green Sun's Twilight in the deck because this card is going to wind up fetching me creatures and lands, which means that I can use this to fetch Vorinclex, which is going to get 2 lands, plus it's going to fetch another land for 3 lands. And so 2 Green Sun's Twilights is really going to get me all of the objectives for this particular node as well. Beyond that, the rest of the stuff that you throw into your deck is really just going to be making it more consistent. And so that's why I'm running Tempt with Discovery, which is, I think, the best card from the current set. It converts 20 gems to green, and then it's going to discover up to 2 times, which is going to let you fetch one of the top 4 cards from your library and give it half mana. From there, I've also got Thunderous Debut so that I can fetch both of the Tortoise and the Vorinclex, which is really, really nice. If you wind up destroying a support to make the Thunderous Debut happen, make sure that you get Vorinclex first, and then you destroy the support for bargain, and then you get the Tortoise, because the Tortoise will then bring that support back as part of its ability. So really, really, really useful. And then I'm closing out the deck with my removal, because you always want a counter to, oh crud, that stuff happened that I don't like. So the Great Aurora is in the deck as a board wipe, and then finally the Kami War is in here for removal. The Kami War is going to serve particularly well in this deck with Ren, because it'll make it so that when you get the 3rd ability down, anytime you make a non-green swap, you're going to get a Kami War back for free from your graveyard and get rid of stuff, so long as there's a Kami War in there. If you've played the Tortoise, you'll probably have one in there. So that's the deck in a nutshell. It's really, really, really easy to play. It's basically free wins on this node. If you're able to make this deck, I would strongly recommend you do, and you'll be able to laugh to the finish line. If you are not able to make that deck, then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take a look at what cards you have in your collection that are going to interact with lands. There are a few of those. I'm going to just go ahead and pull up the card selector here real fast before I show off my newbie deck. The reason I want to pull up the card selector instead of pulling up the newbie deck at first is because the newbie deck that I threw together is not a great deck. It's just one that will function and succeed in the objectives for the event, but there are definitely better ways of going about it if you have the cards to make it so that you can accomplish the objectives. So I just really quickly want to start with that in mind, right? So as we look at these, there are definitely better ways of going about it than my newbie deck, but the newbie deck at least functions. I've tried it out. It works. It's just there's better ways of going about it. So I've talked about Vorinclex. Vorinclex is huge. This one's going to fetch 2 lands and put them in your hand, and it's going to let you play them, which is really nice. Titania's Command is another one that's really good for this, as it's going to fetch a land and give it full mana and then play it. If you do go the Titania's Command route, you want to make sure that you hit cancel, not when the prompt comes up, you don't exile a card from a player's graveyard, so that you do fetch the land card. If you exile someone's graveyard, you don't get the land, so you want to make sure that you are indeed getting the land from that. Kodama of the West Tree is a pretty solid option as well, as this is going to make it so that whenever a creature you control deals damage to your opponent's Planeswalker, if you control a creature that has a buff, then you're going to move the first land support from your library to play. It can only trigger once per turn, but nonetheless, it's going to get you a free land per turn, which is always nice. We like the lands. The lands are good. More lands is, definitely going to be in your favor. I actually want to remove support from this real fast here, as if having support in the selector is going to make things tricky for us. We've got things all through the decks, all through the cards like Fertilid's Favor that are going to go ahead and fetch lands. You can always go ahead and search for what cards you have that are going to go ahead and fetch you lands. Things like Slimefoot's Survey is pretty nice because it's going to fetch 2 lands, which is very, very helpful, especially as you're trying to summon 6 of them. You could also go an entirely different route from that. You could look more into other Puzzle Masters cards like Boundless Realms, which is going to fetch you a land. You could go ahead and get, if you got Huatli, you can use her. I personally really like the Topiary Stomper because this is going to get you a land whenever it enters the battlefield. In terms of some better options, the Shigeki Jukai Visionary is going to get you 2 lands per turn potentially with activation on green. That means that you will want to run green gem conversion for those lands if you can, because as you pop those activated gems, you'll get more lands with full mana. So Shigeki is going to be really good for getting those consistent lands out if you don't have like the big players. Scout the Wilderness, I think, is pretty good as well, because it's a 9 mana card that fetches a land and gives it 9 mana, which is very, very useful. We always like getting, more mana, stuff like that. And then we've also got stuff like Bushwhack, which is going to serve both as removal, in that it's going to make your first creature fight something, and it's also going to give you the option to get a land. So if you need the removal, you use the removal. If you don't need the removal, you get a land, give it half of its mana. So it's not just going to be sitting in your hand, burning a hole in there, waiting for something to happen. So those are cards just to look out for if you don't have the main cards. I should also point out that while Wrenn and Realmbreaker is going to achieve your objective pretty much all on its own just from its kit, that Nissa of Shadowed Bows also makes land support tokens. It's worth noting that the Hissing Quagmire is what I think it is. Yeah, the Hissing Quagmire is a land. I don't know that the Reclaimed Zendikar is. Okay, no, the Reclaimed Zendikar is as well. So you can get some lands just by activating those abilities as well. It's not substantial. As you'll see, each of them is only going to make one land, so it's not my personal recommendation, but you can go that route if you want. Now, the deck that I put together for newer players is going to use some cards that should be familiar to you from what I was showcasing. It's got Shigeki, Jukai Visionary, as it's going to fetch 2 lands. It's got Scout the Wilderness, which is going to fetch a land and give it 9 mana. It's got the Bushwhack for removal and or lands. And then because these PvE opponents are going to have so much health, they're going to have north of 200 health, and they're going to be playing a whole bunch of creatures, you're going to want both a way to kill your opponent and a way to be able to protect yourself a little bit. So I threw Freelance Muscle into this deck just because when it blocks, it gets a Power Toughness buff, which is really going to keep this thing alive as it blocks over and over again. And it's also going to be able to kill your opponent a little bit faster because it's going to be attacking for more power as well. I threw Conclave Naturalists in the deck, not because it's a great card, but because it's support removal and it's a card that everyone has. So that's why that one's in there. And then as for the conversion, you'll see that I wound up throwing Convert Gems to Green or Planeswalker colors. I would definitely run a monocolor Planeswalker for this node. That's my own personal preference. Makes it a lot easier for you to convert gems and get lands and just have it all be consistent. If you want to run something else, by all means, go ahead and do that. And then finally, I threw in the charms for card draw and a little bit more removal because you will absolutely want some kind of removal in your deck. So that's really my recommendation for this node. Make sure that you're running cards that are going to enable you to fetch more lands. You could go that route with card draw instead if you wanted to do that. But honestly, at the end of the day, my ultimate honest-to-goodness recommendation is get yourself Wrenn and Realmbreaker if you don't already have Wrenn and Realmbreaker. This Planeswalker alone will complete the objectives for this event. It's going to cost you 295 mana crystals. There'll be 295 mana crystals very well spent. You're going to be getting yourself a top-tier Planeswalker. And if you have the cards that I have here on the left, then I would definitely go for that. So if there's anything that you think I missed, please go ahead and leave that in the comments. Let me know if you think I missed something in my analysis for this particular objective and event. I wound up running this event last time, or this deck last time, I think, to very great effect. It's very, very easy to hit your objectives this way. So I hope this helps you get a perfect score. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.